Welcome to the show designed to give you crypto confidence. Created by the marketing communications specialists at BlockSparks, we want to help you learn about cryptocurrency and blockchain in a safe and friendly place. Because we believe this stuff is far too exciting to leave it to the geeks. Come and join us to learn more. Hello, Crypto Confidence listeners. If you're new to our podcast, then a warm welcome to you. And if you're a regular listener, you may remember hearing from today's guest on the previous episode. And thank you, everybody, for sharing your feedback and enthusiasm about our World Book Day special. We loved bringing that bumper edition to your ears, and it was made possible by the generous contributions from across our community. One of the people who shared a book recommendation with us was Sukhi Jutla, who is the Chief Operating Officer of Market Orders, a London-based online marketplace connecting independent gold jewellery retailers to their manufacturers to get the best products at the best prices. A Renaissance woman after my own heart, Sukhi has recently been appointed to advise the Mayor of London about blockchain technology, and she's also a best-selling author. So last time we discussed books about the blockchain. Today we're going to be looking at books on the blockchain, amongst other things. Welcome, Sukhi.
Hi, Maya. It's really great to be on the show today. Thank you so much for having me.
That's a great pleasure. Now, please, first of all, would you start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your journey into this blockchain and crypto world?
Absolutely. So thank you so much for that fabulous introduction. You did mention that I am the co-founder of Market Orders. So I am an entrepreneur and I run my own tech startup business with a co-founder, and I have a team as well. But before that, I was actually a corporate employee. So I spent 10 years in banking. I usually say I sold my soul in banking until I found it again and left. And I have been on this entrepreneurial journey full time for 3 years. And whilst I was building my business, I sort of accidentally fell into technology. So I'm not a programmer or a coder. I was trained in sort of business skills, but I sort of really got interested in technology because during my corporate phase, I was facing off to the technology teams within the banks.
Right.
And when you're working with large banks, there's a lot of technology that's, happening under the bonnet of the car, so to say, to get all the trades and processes done. And so that really interested me. And just before I was about to leave the corporate world, I came across a term known as fintech. And that was in around 2015. And It was a relatively new term. And it was like, people on the fringes were talking about fintech, and there was sort of these new startups that were emerging to do with payments. And, I came across this payment provider called M-Pesa in Africa, which was like,
right. Yeah, it's all mobile, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And what really struck me was the ability for, hundreds and thousands of people to finally get access to basic banking facilities by using mobile technology. And so that's where my interest really peaked in fintech, what it meant and what it was all about. And so during that time, as I was sort of going down the rabbit hole and just learning about fintech, that's when I also came across the word Bitcoin. And, back then I thought Bitcoin was just something that drug dealers normally dealt with.
Yeah, it's just for criminals and gangsters, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it was a dark web. And but then as I continued to read more about it, I started to learn about the technology underpinning it, the blockchain. And I was lucky enough to be invited to co-author one of the first books to be actually on the topic of blockchain technology and fintech. So the book was actually called The Fintech Book, and I was one of the co-authors, and I contributed a chapter about how third world and emerging economies were using fintech and blockchain as part of their financial models. And this is where I just thought it was such an interesting world, because I actually didn't realize, when you are lucky enough to live in a first world country where it's relatively easy to get access to a bank account, where I am in London, I was really sort of insulated from how so many millions of people around the world don't even have access to basic financial products such as a
We
bank
just
account.
take it for granted, don't we, that we can have,
Mm,
access to services and affordable credit and
yeah,
everything just works and payments happen. But it is a really, it's quite a bubble, well, compared to the rest of the world, particularly the less developed world.
absolutely, Maya. Like you just hit the nail on the head. And, I just thought without a basic bank account, there's just so many things that you are unable to do.
Mm.
And that's why so many people remain in poverty and cannot move forward. So I started to look into, doing research about these incredible companies in India and Africa and Latin America, and how there was this huge impetus and push about creating payments and technologies to facilitate payments that were sort of bypassing the big banks, because it was a large corporates who were really profiteering from the poor usually, and unfortunately that's how it happens. Um,
Absolutely. Always will be, I'm afraid, isn't it? It's
yeah,
sad.
yeah, absolutely. So I started to, I got very interested in that. I wrote the book, I contributed a chapter to the book, and it was published. And once that was released, I was actually, I sort of, I was sort of learning more and more about how this technology works. And then that's how I fell into the world of how creators and authors could actually use blockchain, because the technology I was really looking at was the payments, and how do you make the whoever creates the value, how do you ensure that they are at the center of the financial model and they're
Mm.
not the ones right at the bottom getting the crumbs.
Yeah, that's so interesting because I think everything about your journey, it's been sort of moving out towards the edges when you started in the corporate heart of finance and then becoming more and more embedded in the technology that makes it work. I was fascinated by what you said about finding the bank technology, the interesting part of it, and how much technology goes into enabling us to take for granted the fact that we just go to the cash point and get some money out and it just magically works and comes off the correct account. And I think it just made me think, is there any business that's not a technology industry today? Maybe subsistence farming or something, you needn't interact with any tech whatsoever, but everything else is touched by it. But for the most part, if it's working well, if the user experience is great, then it usually doesn't impinge. But I don't think any of us can say we don't work in or with technology nowadays. And I'm exactly the same as you, that I've never come from that background as a developer or a programmer, but always been fascinated about what it can do and how it improves the human condition and what social impact it has. So I can really understand and appreciate your journey through fintech. It's been an amazing time for the finance and fintech industry, hasn't it? Just the last few years, the changes.
Yes, it has. And, like you said, Maya, there are so many touch points in our lives where technology intersects. And with the banking world, they were these large, monopolies of the large institutions and banks who have sort of taken for granted their customers.
Mm.
And I think now we are having such an emergence and almost like a renaissance of all these startups on the fringe who are now demanding better customer service for their customers. And that's why the large banks are now being forced to actually take a look at how they operate, because it's not just about collecting deposits from people. It's about what else can you actually, add value. And customers' preferences are what causes disruption.
Mm.
So you have customers who want to consume certain things online. So I know for one of my banks, it took a while for them to actually switch me over to online bank statements.
Wow.
And even though I kept asking them, do not send me paper statements, they literally said, our systems are programmed like that and we're working on it and we can't just switch it off for you.
Oh, God. It's so funny, isn't it? You get these legacy hangovers. When we
Yeah.
first moved to Spain 10 years ago, there was no chip and pin. We had to go back to signing at cash registers and producing ID with a match signature on it and trying to think, God, can I remember how to do my signature? I can't remember the last time I had to do this. And obviously we have chip and pin now, but I love the way that technology goes like that, leapfrogging from one state to another, depending on where it starts from. And now in Spain, we have quite advanced online banking apps and quite a high acceptance of things like Apple Pay. And I think there were a lot more opportunities to swipe cards. Whereas the UK, you still had to put your card in and tap your PIN for longer. So
Yeah.
it's wonderfully uneven, isn't it? And I suppose that's exactly like the mobile banking revolution in Africa, where there weren't the fixed line connections in the first place.
Absolutely. And, again, you just hit the nail on the head when you mentioned the word leapfrog. So you have countries, customers in India and Africa who went, they just went straight to not even one mobile, but like three mobile phones.
Mm.
So like, they say in India, every person has almost three mobile phones. They don't have laptops, they don't have tablets, they don't have desktops, but they'll have three mobile phones.
Wow. So, because they'd lose the other two. Well, I would lose the other two immediately. But if that's your whole life and that's the way you connect to the outside world, then that's
Yeah.
absolutely amazing. And it certainly offers a lot of hope and encouragement. I suppose in India, I know WhatsApp's huge, and they're going to be the first people probably to get the Facebook coin, the Zuckbucks or whatever they decide to do with WhatsApp. That's all a huge secret. Have you got any ideas what they might be going to announce from your insider
No,
perspective?
so this is just a very uneducated guess, but I do think that, I do agree with you. WhatsApp is absolutely huge in India. My background is Indian, so I know lots of my family in India. Their lives are lived on WhatsApp, and WhatsApp, is owned by Facebook. So I think there is going to be a huge uptake and adoption in that country because they're just so enmeshed in WhatsApp because it is a great, service. It
Yeah.
does what it says. It's free to use. So I think that's what's so great about WhatsApp. They hit the nail on the head. They're delivering exactly what the customer wants.
Yeah, and they're going to clean up. I mean, as soon as that happens, it's going to be such a game changer for crypto. Talk about network effects. We've got 2
Yes,
billion users off the cuff there.
absolutely.
I don't know what that's going to do to the market. So it'll be interesting. We'll be talking
Yeah.
about it at Crypto Confidence. And the other interesting thing you mentioned about how few people in the less developed world are likely to have a bank account in the first place. One of the things we were discussing in our Facebook community this week was some recent research in the UK, just reminding us that there are about 1 million people, either unbanked or underbanked, who still don't have access to those things we take for granted. And I was quite shocked by that.
Yes, it is shocking actually, because we do normally associate these things with emerging economies. But actually, you're absolutely right. There are many people in this country who actually still struggle to get a bank account, and which is very, very sad because I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, in the world we live in, money is, the driver that actually it's a resource that allows you to do many other things.
Yeah.
So if you don't have a bank account, it's going to be very difficult for you to probably, get someone to rent or buy a property, sign up for services, use the NHS.
Yeah.
It really sort of disables you because I know in my personal experience I had in one of my previous businesses, one of my business bank accounts was frozen by my bank, and they wouldn't give me an explanation as to why, and they had my funds locked, frozen for 6 months, and they had also frozen my personal bank account, and they wouldn't tell
Oh
me
my
why.
God. What a
Yeah,
nightmare.
and they just kept on saying, "Oh, we're just doing a review." And every time you phone up the bank, you're talking to a different
Yeah.
person, and they have no idea. And this basically, I was locked out of my only bank account for my business for 6 months. And so I'm so grateful and so lucky that I had another bank account sitting on with a different bank, and I luckily had a few funds in that separate bank account so I could run my business and pay my rent. But it really made me realize and think about how even someone like me, I've had a bank account with this bank for like over 16 years. I've had no
Oh, what a
issues with
way to
them. And
treat you. That's terrible.
yeah, and that's when it really hit me that it's really dangerous for one entity to actually have sole control over your funds.
Yes, absolutely. When we started BlockSparks a year or so ago, I was so convinced that I could do it all using Challenger FinTech services that I opened a business bank account with Revolut, which turned out to be a huge mistake. I couldn't make it connect to PayPal. I had trouble using the IBAN all over the place. And I spent so long on the calls to customer support just trying to use money that we'd been given, and it was ended up stuck in one bucket or another. I couldn't draw it down from PayPal because they didn't like the bank it was connected to, and yeah, incredibly frustrating. I ended up banging down phones a lot, thinking, crypto's coming. You better watch out. We won't have to put up with this in a few years. And eventually
Yes.
the people at the edges, people doing the work, will just have access to their money, to their earnings, to their royalties. It's got come the revolution.
Yes,
It's coming.
absolutely. Bring it on.
But I suppose that idea of getting paid for our work brings us neatly round to the idea of the people who create value in the first place, the authors, the musicians, the artists, and the people who, as you said at the very beginning, are often the last to get paid. So there are a lot of problems in the creative industries with the way things are done at the moment, aren't there?
Yes, absolutely. So last year in April 2018, I became the first author in the world to publish my book onto the blockchain. And now, whenever I tell people that, they usually look at me with a very confused face and say, Suki, that sounds great, but what does it actually mean
Mm.
to have a book on the blockchain? So what I do, what I say to people is, all it really means is if you now purchase my book and it's via the blockchain mechanism, what that means is you actually purchase a copy of my book and it belongs to you forever. Secondly, when you purchase a book from me using crypto and using the blockchain mechanism, you are paying me directly. So I am the value creator in this relationship. You are paying me directly so that there is no middleman. So in the olden terms, there would be a publisher sitting between me and my reader. And so when you are paying me directly, it means I now walk away with 90% of the book price. 10% goes to Publica, which is the blockchain publishing company that facilitates the service. And then the reader receives a copy of the book. Now, here's the most revolutionary thing. The book that you've purchased now belongs to you. Now, at this point, people usually say to me, oh, well, I've got tons of books on Amazon and I own those books. And this is where I usually correct them. When you purchase a book on Amazon Kindle, you are only purchasing the license to read the content.
Oh, right. Yes, because I suppose the author can update it, they could withdraw it, they could. And Amazon presumably could do all that and more.
Absolutely. And so this is where, the focus comes. Amazon is the middleman. You have an account with Amazon, your relationship with and contract is with Amazon. So at any point in time, they have the authority and the right to go in and wipe your account clean. They can delete whatever they like. They can wipe your Kindle books. And this actually happened a couple of years ago. There was a huge dispute between Amazon and one of the largest publishers called Hachette Publishers. And Hachette basically had a book. I cannot remember the name, but basically they had a dispute with Amazon about how much money they were going to get paid. So Amazon just said, you know what, we're going to take your book out of our catalog. So all the people who had previously bought that book, overnight the book just disappeared from the catalog, even though
Wow.
they had paid for it. And so, so this is what gets me so excited about books and blockchain. Because now you actually have a real case study where you're paying the value creator directly, and then the value creator is sending you a product and they're saying to you, this is yours and now you can do whatever you like with it. And if you were to purchase my book, it's called Escape the Cubicle, Quit the Job You Hate, Create a Life You Love. And it was like it's like a self-help career book that I wrote to help
Yeah.
me to
Amen
escape.
to all of that.
So it was a book I wrote for myself, really, and it was all about how do I, really create the life I'm really passionate about and pursue my passions and dreams rather than sitting at a corporate cubicle and just, dying. What's that word? Death by a thousand cuts, and I
Oh,
always say it's death by a thousand spreadsheets.
yes. That's corporate banking summed up in a sentence, I guess.
Yeah. And so that's the book that I put onto the blockchain, and the story just behind it is, so when I wrote the fintech book, available in a traditional store on the British High Street called Waterstones, and a friend of mine actually went into Waterstones and she picked up the book and she started to read the fintech book and she saw my name in it. So she gives me a call and she says, Suki, I've been trying to understand what blockchain is all about. So I picked up this book. I saw your name in it. So can we go for a coffee and you can explain what this is all about, considering you wrote the book? And secondly, I want a refund on my book because I should have just gone straight to you.
Yeah, because you're just expected to have all your friends' names on the door forever. And
Yeah. So I met up with my friend. Her name is Orna Ross, and she's actually the founder of a wonderful organization called the Alliance of Independent Authors. And this organization is an author-centric community of people who are professional self-publishers. So what that means is we publish quality books, but we use independent designers and copywriters and formatters, and we publish direct to the market. So we will go straight to publishers and put our books online. So we are not going through a traditional publisher.
right,
So we're not
okay.
really going through, third party essentially. And so my book, Escape the Cubicle, is it's an independent, self-published book. So I have my own publishing company that I set up, and I publish it through that. And the reason I did that is because my royalties are going to be much higher if I'm going sort of like, this is like semi-direct. Using blockchain is completely like direct. It's like me and you as a reader. But self-published authors normally go through like Amazon because they have that platform. But again, you're still sort of at the mercy of these large organizations. And I really didn't want to go through a traditional publisher such as, I can't remember the names, like Bloom, can't remember now.
I suppose there's Penguin and places
Bloomsbury,
like that. Yeah.
yeah, Bloomsbury and Penguin, because their royalties are, I think it's an embarrassment, really. They usually give between 7 or 10% to authors.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to go through that process. And, I'm very entrepreneurial in nature, and I didn't want to wait 2 years for someone at the top of a organization to deem my book to be good enough and then, release it 2 years later. I had the book ready to go and I wanted to go live.
You've done the work, you've written it, researched it,
Yeah.
edited it, and put it together. That's such an enormous piece of work that you can't then just let someone kick it to the back of the pile for a while and pay you a few percent in royalties whenever.
Absolutely. So then myself and Orna had a chat, and she said that she was very interested in exploring how authors and creatives could use blockchain, because she had been doing some research about this particular lady called Imogen Heap. And Imogen Heap is an award-winning Grammy musician. And she was actually the first artist in the world to publish her entire album using blockchain technology. So what she did was she listed her album online for free. And then depending on how much you actually listen to her music, micropayments would then get deducted from your digital wallet, depending on how many seconds you were listening and downloading her music. And, with blockchain, you can take micropayments. You can take payments which are worth less than a penny. And this really sort of blew up, and this came to Orna's attention. And so she had an idea. She thought, how about the authors? Or could the author community benefit from something similar? Because authors and publishing are usually a couple of steps behind from the digital musical world.
Right.
That's where we're sort of, always following the lead. So she asked me to put together a 500-word white paper about how authors and creatives could use blockchain in terms of payments and distributing their content and looking at the rights. And so that's when I got further deeper down into this rabbit hole, and I started to do more research. And that's when I came across a Latvian-based publishing company called Publica. And I had a couple of conversations with their CEO. I actually went out to visit the company, and I really, really liked what they were doing. And what they had this, this vision of allowing authors to publish directly onto the blockchain, so that authors, they could actually sell their products direct to the readers using crypto and using blockchain. And so this 500-word white paper ballooned into a 10,000-word sort of mini book. and we had a few other collaborators who contributed to it. And that's how, on the show notes, I'll share the document with you guys. It's a free white paper. I would really urge people to take a look and really sort of educate themselves about how musicians and authors and creatives could actually use this technology, because it's very interesting and it's very new. And this is actually a proven use case. I was the first, my book was the first book to go online, but now there are a few more. So you can definitely see how it works and, sort of just empower yourselves.
Fantastic. It solves so many of the problems that pervade the traditional creative industries, doesn't it? This idea that you can get paid in absolute direct proportion to how much people consume and enjoy the content itself, like Imogen Heap's streaming by the second. You can't do that with traditional money. There just isn't
No, you
all the
can't.
fintech in the world. You can't make micropayments like that. And this idea of value actually flowing like energy is really exciting. But there's just something also so intrinsically fair about it as a creative person, to get rewarded in proportion to how much you're giving to the world. I really, really like that idea.
Well, I actually love what you just said, Maya, about how the flow of energy, um, because money, it's called currency, right? And the word currency comes from the word current, and as in CURRENT, which relates to the electrical current. And it's all about electricity and energy. So money is actually just a form of energy, and energy is like the value that you create. And I also feel that for too many years, the most creative people have been quite abused by the people right at the top of the chain, who usually profit from this creativity.
Yeah, musicians, painters, photographers,
artists,
everybody gets ripped off by the distribution and the gatekeepers in the traditional world. It's so exciting to be able to go direct to market with something that you've created and that people want.
Absolutely, Maya. And when you go direct to market, you actually have a closer relationship with the person who's now paying you. So now you can actually together co-create. So I think, like even with Imogen Heap's album, she could see exactly where people stopped listening, and she could see where people were listening, where the largest downloads were happening. And so like even with my book, you could develop a technology where I could see where exactly people stopped paying, because maybe there was a section that was really boring, and I could take the book down and rewrite that content and then put it back up. So it's almost like live co-creation.
Fantastic.
And I just think,
real-time feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. And just coming back to the micropayment element, for again, there's like 90% of people on this earth do not have an Amazon account.
Wow.
Now,
right. Okay. That's even more shocking than the proportion of people unbanked. Just how dependent I know I am on the big A.
Yeah, because again, we are lucky enough to live in a society where these things we take for granted. So for people that do not have an Amazon account, or they, like I think in Latvia, when I went to visit, you can have an Amazon account, but products don't get shipped to Latvia. They get shipped to Belgium. And then from Belgium, they have to get sent to you with a local courier, because Amazon doesn't have that distribution in Latvia yet. So that was like, oh my God, I didn't have, I had no idea. And so in some countries where Amazon does exist, they don't have a fully functional payment service. So what happens is, if some authors are selling books, they have to wait until their account hits a certain amount of funds, such as $50. Then they have to go to a bank and they get they cash out the check. But because they're cashing out the check, the bank will then take fees on top of that. So if you were trying to cash in $50, you might only walk away with something like $27.
Oh, it's disgusting, isn't it? They just get burned at every point. The delay, then having to actually take the time probably to visit a bank with a piece of paper, and then to get ripped off for a fee as well, and probably another currency conversion cost on top of that. It's
I know. So like if you now think about digital wallets and paying with cryptocurrencies and having all these different payments coming in directly to the author, he can now look at his digital wallet and he can see, okay, I have this many Bitcoins, I have this many Ethers, I have this many, whatever other coins, this many Pebbles. Publica, their native currency is called Pebbles. And so the flow goes straight to where it needs to go. And I find that just really, really exciting.
Definitely. I completely agree. I suspect that the likes of Amazon probably don't see this in such a positive way as you and I are getting so enthusiastic about it. What do you think it's going to mean for institutions like Amazon in the future?
So that's another great question. So, Amazon is like, the largest bookstore, and you will find a large majority of authors will have their books sitting in Amazon. So for them, it is quite important. But if you look at Amazon as a whole, their book business is very, very, very small. So are they going to be incentivized to create a blockchain layer infrastructure for their authors to upload their books onto the blockchain as opposed to the Kindle platform? Mm-hmm. I don't know, because I don't know if there's enough money in it for them to do that. But on the other side, this now gives a huge sort of playing ground for other startups to come in and create these new offerings and then approach these authors and say, hey, do you know there's other ways you can actually distribute your book rather than just sitting in the Amazon ecosystem? Because the biggest problem for authors is discoverability. Mm. And if you don't have an Amazon account and your book is only available on Amazon, then that means these people, millions and millions of people, aren't going to see your book.
Yeah, you're invisible. So there have to be alternatives then. So if somebody came to you today and said, look, I'm a new author, I really want to self-publish my first work, what sort of advice would you give them? Where would you suggest to start?
So what I would say, and this is what I do, is I go wide. So that means my book is not just exclusive on certain platforms. So my book is available on Amazon. You can get the paperback and you can get the Kindle version. But I also have my book available on like thousands of different bookstores around the world because I've gone through a large distributor called Ingram Spark. So my book is available on like these other random Chinese online bookstores because, they get their stock from Ingram Spark. And then I've also got my book available on Publica.com, which is a blockchain publishing company. So my book can now be consumed in so many different ways because, again, our job as creators is to make sure that we are delighting our customers and helping them to consume whatever we create in the content that they prefer. So another example I always use is, Amazon's Audible section is really thriving. So Audible is the books that are you can listen to.
Yeah, I love audiobooks. I'm certainly non-fiction. Okay, so I just tend to go for Audible, which is awful when you're trying to remember something afterwards.
So this is exactly the point I wanted to actually stress. You just said you love listening to audiobooks. I am the complete opposite. I can only listen and consume podcasts because they are short, sharp, specific content. But I'm a reader, Maya.
You want a book. Do you have a tree book or an ebook? What would you choose?
I have tree books.
You want it in your hand.
Yes, I need it in my hand. But I literally had like over 1,000 books in my at home. Then I stopped buying physical books, and now I just I think I'm like the VIP member at my local library. I just take books out from the library now.
Oh, that's brilliant that your library is still thriving. You're keeping it going, obviously, single-handedly.
Yeah, I think. And it's hilarious. I literally think I'm the only person who orders stock in because every time I want a book, I just order it, and I just get it the next day. So it's great. It's like a VIP service.
That's like as quick as Amazon. So
exactly.
Why not have it for free? Do you not miss sort of keeping the book? I tend to really abuse books, physical books. They end up with corners turned and post-it notes, or sometimes just with highlighter or notes right in the book, which I know lots of people would say is sacrilegious, but I would miss that, I think, if I borrowed them. But it's a much greener thing to do. So
yeah.
Well done. I salute you. I think that's absolutely fascinating advice for anybody looking at self-publishing. And I'm sure that anybody who's interested can get in touch with the organisation you published your book through. We'll put links to them as well in the show notes and make sure everybody checks out that white paper. Lots of interesting stuff in there, for sure. Now, I know that as well as writing and as well as working in market orders, you are somebody who wears many different hats in the business world. And you've recently been appointed to advise the Mayor of London about blockchain technology. That's a really fascinating move. I don't know how much you're allowed to tell us about that. I'm sure a lot of the advice is quite confidential, but what is he interested in?
Sure. So yeah, I mean, I can talk openly about this because the mayor of London, he's very sort of open about what he's doing. So I'll just go one step back. The reason why the mayor of London set up this specific board, and it's called the New Business Skills Business Partnership Board, and what it is essentially is about is the mayor of London wants every person in London to be able to have the skills in order to go for the jobs and the employment opportunities that they want. And what he found was many people cannot strive for what they want because they lack the skills.
Mm.
So what he's done is he's put together this board called the Skills Business Partnership, and he's asked this board who consists of many different business leaders, myself included, and he's talking to us and he's asking us as business owners, what skills do you find that are lacking in the types of people that you want to join your organization?
Mm.
So my voice is more predominantly representing entrepreneurs, startups, the tech community, and blockchain. So as a businesswoman who runs Market Orders, which is a tech digital company, and we're also moving into blockchain, where I'm struggling is finding the right people who have the skills in order to develop this technology. So that's when I can go to the mayor and say, in the next 5 to 10 years, the business is going to be shifting in this specific way. And so we are going to have to train Londoners and people across the UK to have these skills.
Yeah.
Now, to have these skills, what does a mayor need to do? And that's why he's really listening, because that's when we say we need the educational facilities, we need low barriers to entry, because sometimes education does have a price to it. So how do you ensure that anyone who wants to pursue a career in blockchain and they have no idea at the moment what it is, how can they step into it? Are there introductory courses? Is there a low cost of a barrier to enter this? How do we ensure that there's a diverse community who can enter blockchain? How do we ensure that women don't get left out of the conversation? So these are the conversations that we're having. And I think what is so brilliant is that the mayor of London, he knows that the digital technology that we have today is going to look very different in 10 years' time. And the jobs that we are going to be recruiting for in 10 years' time, their job roles haven't even been, discovered or created.
Yeah.
So 10 years ago, I wouldn't even know what a social media manager would do. And now every company needs to have a social media manager because of, the explosion of Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. You actually need a full-time team in place to actually manage this for you.
Yes. And the schools are still not preparing people. I mean, they're still training them up for these jobs that aren't even going to exist yet. They certainly are in Spain. I don't think it's that different in the UK. They're not giving them the skills and the breadth of communication skills and critical thinking. And the only way to prepare for the unknown is to be resilient against all of those challenges rather than think you're going to go down a particular path. It's really exciting to hear that the Mayor of London is looking ahead, peering into the future when none of us have a crystal ball.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I love that word you said, resiliency. And resiliency is all about how do you ensure that you've kind of got that armor ready so whatever comes your way, you're able to adapt and change. And yes, I agree, Maya. When I went to school, so I'm immensely grateful for the education I received. But the flaw to the educational system is it's still very much focused on the old factory mentality, that like churning out corporate cogs or factory workers who just do 9 to 5 kind of jobs. And 9 to 5 for life doesn't exist anymore. No. You've got this rise of the gig economy. I know people who do delivery jobs in the morning and then they do Ubering in the evening. So what type of a job is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think to survive and make a career for yourself now as a young person is incredibly difficult. And coming out with
Absolutely.
a string of useful qualifications in things like geography, probably, well, it might help you if you're delivering, I suppose. But all
Yeah,
those traditional academic subjects, whereas people really, instead, they need to know how to write, how to communicate their ideas, how to continue to look ahead and scan for where that interface between the technology and the people is going to be. And that's always shifting, but it will always exist, and humans will always behave in a certain way and be motivated in a certain way. So I
yeah.
think it's great. I really hope that the UK is going to stay in the forefront of providing these opportunities. And we're not going to mention the B word, but the UK is going through quite a state of flux at the moment.
Yeah,
Do you feel
yeah,
optimistic
absolutely.
for the future for emergent technology and crypto in the UK?
Yeah, I do. So I am quite optimistic by nature, but I do feel very excited. I mean, like, like I just mentioned, people have gig economy jobs.
Hmm.
I don't think this is a bad thing at all. I just think it's people who are actually reclaiming the type of life they want.
Yeah,
People don't want to be stuck behind, a desk for 8 hours a day. People want to live their lives how they want. They want freedom and they want the flexibility as well. And
definitely.
I do feel very confident about the future because I do think that technology is an incredible enabler, and I do feel that it will come in and do more of the mundane tasks that we don't need to waste our time on. So,
Yes.
for example, is there any value in teaching a child how to solve a quadratic equation
Oh
when
God,
you're
spare me. I have teenage daughters struggling in high school at the moment. We're coming
I
home
mean,
with.
yeah, I mean, like, think about it. It's a nice to have, but if your machine can solve that for you within 2 seconds, isn't it better that your daughters spend their intelligence and their creativity creating new things that robots can't do?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think it's a terrible shame that that's still what's going on. And then the jobs that are being lost are going to be across the board, and we're going to definitely see that change. I think one of the interesting things about the gig economy that is that we're going to see hopefully some more blockchain solutions coming on that, again, just as with the authors and the singers, push that value out to the providers and eliminate the central parties that trap all the value, and will have the drivers being paid directly rather than Uber making
Yes,
billions, and whoever else is controlling. Because a lot of these people are very poorly paid for hard physical on demand work that they do, and
yes.
it's absolutely always going to be a need for that flexibility and responsiveness. And hopefully in time, thanks to blockchain transparency, we'll start to see a little bit more of that value going to the people whose legs are pushing the bikes along or driving the cars.
Absolutely. And I think it's just weird as well. Like, if you just look at the history of the world, I feel like we're sort of going back to the way things always used to be, like the traditional marketplace,
Mm.
where if I want to purchase something from you, I can go direct to you and we can exchange that value
Yes, we don't
rather
need a
than,
third party to
yeah,
give us credit and trust and
yeah,
take a big cut out of all of it. It's
yeah,
fantastic. We've got, just like what you're doing with market orders, putting people directly in touch with each other, instead of having to
absolutely.
go through all these third parties. So the future's bright then. We're excited and optimistic.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very excited about all these frontier technologies. And, we didn't even really touch upon the AI, machine learning,
Yes.
or, connecting, the Internet of Things, all these devices. So I think that, with blockchain, I mean, we're still like just literally 10 years into this technology. We're just like in its infancy. We're still, the ground, I always say, is still so fertile. And
Mm.
I think it's so important that we just plant as many seeds as possible, do the work, nurture it, and then see what flourishes. And of course, like when the seed is trying to push its way from the darkness into the light and striving toward the sunlight, there's always going to be that struggle. There's always going to be people who are going to be upset about the changes happening because they don't want the status quo to change. But I think there's always going to be, humans, we are all entrepreneurial by nature. We strive for this creativity to be, released. And I think that there's going to be many, many new changes. And I think the world that we're going to be living in the next 10 years is going to be very different from the world that, we're speaking in today.
And that's what's so exciting about it, isn't it? We have to stay enthusiastic and exciting and somehow um, convey that enthusiasm to the rest of the world. I think that's definitely what attracts me to working in this space and to doing this podcast. It's wonderful. I get to talk to people like you who are out there doing it and pushing these boundaries and bringing new things to the world. So it has been absolutely fantastic, Sukhi. I've really enjoyed talking to you. It makes me want to go and finish editing my book.
Oh, fantastic.
And talk to you more.
Everyone to write a book. Just go for it. I think everyone has a story to share. So I'll be looking out for that book, Maya.
Definitely. Oh, that's great. Well, it'll be my first foray into fiction, but there'll be more coming along about that soon. I hope that's it. That's the first time I've said that publicly. So that's put a stake in the ground and committed me to it. So we'll have to keep in touch. But in the meantime, Sukhi, where is the best place for people to get in touch with you online? We'll put links in the show notes, but just so people know where to find you.
Sure. So I am very active on LinkedIn. So please do connect with me, drop me a message, say hello. But you can also find me on Facebook and Twitter and all the usual social channels.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, for now, thank you very, very much for taking the time to talk to us today. And yes, it's been great chatting to you, Sukhi. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Maya. It's been a pleasure.
So I really hope you enjoyed that conversation with Sukhi Jutla. I found so much to inspire me in there, and it was the perfect follow-up to our previous episode all about books about the blockchain, to then roll on to talking about books on the blockchain. If you didn't catch that episode 17, I strongly recommend it to you. We've had some amazing feedback about it, and I really appreciate everybody who took the time to tweet us and message us and join us on our Facebook community to discuss it. It's been really great to have that input. There are lots of ways that you can get in touch with us. Please tweet us at CryptoConfPod. If you want to send us a message, you can email us. You can simply email Maya at blocksparks.io. I'll read all your emails. And if you would like to send us a voice memo, you'd be extremely welcome. We have a special place that you can do that. It's on an app called SpeakPipe. And the URL you need to go to is cryptoconfidencepodca. So that's podca.st/speak. It actually looks a lot more intuitive when you write it out. It's Crypto Confidence Podcast, but with a dot between the A and the S, and then /speak. That will take you to our voicemail box, and you can send us a quick message if there's anything you would like to share with us, any feedback or opinions. That's exactly what Pilar did. So we'll end up with her words.
Hello, Maya and others at the Crypto Confidence podcast. My name is Pilar Orti, and I just wanted to say what a great show to be distributing out there to help people like myself who have no idea about blockchain or cryptocurrencies, etc., and just help us to understand the space a little bit better. So thank you for the work.
Thanks for listening to Crypto Confidence. If you like what you hear, please do consider leaving us a review via your favourite podcasting app and joining the conversation online in whichever way you prefer. Full contact details are in the show notes for this episode. And remember, nothing in this podcast or our related social media, nor anything else published by Blocksparks OU at any location, is intended as financial, investment or trading advice. Everything we write or say represents our personal opinions for your information, education and entertainment only. You should not make any decisions based on anything we share with you, not without undertaking independent due diligence and consultation with appropriate professional advisors. Crypto Confidence is all about being smart and informed and making the right choices for you.